building of the Second Temple period, first early decades of the 1st century CE, that was unearthed, I would say, for more than a century. This room, where we stand right now, actually was documented by Sir Charles Warren at the late 19th century. He came from this window, which is up there, and he just jumped somehow with a ladder. Everything was filled up with soil to a certain height, but he entered and he saw the tops of the walls and saw the magnificence of the room. And the room was enclosed by a wall over here that we just, where you see this iron poles, just dismantled this wall.
What year was this?
1867. More than 100 years ago, about 140 years ago. And he named it the Masonic Hall, Ulam HaBonim HaChofshiyim. He made it because he was a member of the Masons, of the Freemasons, and he arranged a meeting of the Freemasons. So the room was then documented, partly documented by an American archaeologist named Steinspring, and excavated by Professor Dan Bahat and Professor Aaron Meyer in the early 90s, this room. And so we knew it's a magnificent building of the Second Temple period. After the excavation of Professor Bahat and Meyer, it was named the Herodian Hall. Prior to that, it was called the Hasmonean Hall. Prior to that, the Freemasons Hall. But this very, very magnificent building was already known. What's new that was unearthed in the last decade, I would say, since 2008, 2009, that the Israeli Antiquities Authority is working here, the excavations were directed by the late Alexander On, my colleague, and I was working with him. Alexander On. He was directing the excavation in the continuation of this building, and soon I will tell you the development of the excavation. And I continued it since 2018, when the Foundation for the Heritage of the Western Wall wanted to open a new touristic route for tourists to allow them to enter this building. So we had to dismantle blocking walls and continue the excavation further below the floors. So for the last 3 years, from 2018 to 2020, I was directing a very small excavation here in order to allow for the touristic tour, and meanwhile could find out new things about the building. Now, the history of the building is very, very special because we are speaking about a public monumental building that is 20 meters away from the Herodian Temple Mount, that for sure was used in order to host people, the important people, guests of the leaders of the city, I would say, that used to gather here around the walls on sofas, on coaches. We call it triclinium in the Roman period, a habit that started already in the Greek period and lasted to the late Roman period. So we know that almost in every big house in the Hellenistic, Greek, Hellenistic, and then Roman time, there was a room where the owner of the house gathered and met the people, and they gathered on coaches and they were drinking and eating and holding symposia, and also such triclinia, such rooms where people could gather and lean on kline. Tricline is 3 sofas around the U-shaped or het-shaped shape of the room. People were gathering around and offered drinks and food and holding all kind of talks. But the building has 2 triclinium, 2 assemblage rooms like this. One is the one where we stand right now, that, as I told you before, was known since the 19th century, but only now we understand the big picture of the building, because it has another similar room to the west, and in between these 2 assembly rooms there is a fountain, a very, very impressive fountain that was inside this building. So the question is, who built, when built this structure, who built it, why did they build it, what is the significance of the location of the building? In order to answer that, let me show you a little bit the details of the architecture. The decoration, first of all, one would enter the building from a double entrance, which is very impressive, at the eastern side, about 20 meters away from the Herodian Temple Mount. The connection with the Temple Mount was not exactly as it is now. First of all, because we think this building was constructed a little bit before the Herodian Temple Mount was enlarged, and therefore this building was built along the main way that led to the Temple Mount, but to the smaller Hasmonean period Temple Mount, the Temple Mount that existed before King Herod or whoever did it enlarged the temenos of the Temple Mount. So a monumental public building was built along a way that was leading to the one main entrance of the Temple Mount from the west. The main entrance gate that, according to the sources, was called the Kiponos Gate, one gate in the western wall of the pre-Herodian Temple Mount, and our building is built along this way. The decoration of the walls is wonderful. There is a very impressive double entrance from the west, and then you entered into the hall. Everything is built from worked stones with flat faces, and it is decorated with pilasters, which are like flat columns with Corinthian capitals. You don't see the Corinthian capitals here very clear, but you would see them in the fountain in the center of the building. Everything was decorated with such pilasters enthroned with Corinthian capitals. Along the lower part of the wall was a cornice, string stone like this, a carved cornice. Below the cornice, on the lowest third part of the wall, were couches or benches or sofas against the walls, where people would lean while they were holding talks and drinking and speaking and having good time. According to the architecture of the building, this is first of all, we must say this is a suggestion. This is the way we understand, because we say, first of all, it's a public structure. It's not a private, it's not part of a private house. It is located along the way that led to the Temple Mount. The magnificence, the size of the building, the ability, technical ability, soon we will speak a little bit about the fountain, teaches us about abilities of the people who built it. This is not someone private. This is someone who belongs to the leaders, to the elites, you say? Elites. Of the city. These are the leaders. This is the city councillors. These are the rulers of the city. It's not the king. If it was the king, there would have been only one room with one big chair in the center. But if there are two things exactly the same, it's not for the king. But it's for people you want to honor them just before climbing to the Temple Mount, possibly. So the habit of holding banquet is, we know it from several places. It is in private houses, it is in palaces, it is near temples, it is in graveyards because people would gather once a year. It is a habit, the banqueting, started, we already know it from the prophet Amos. Amos was angry of the people in the 8th century BCE in the Bible. He was speaking against the people who drink wine in all kind of... so he did not like this habit very much, but we know that Israelites already held banquets, feasts in rooms, leaning on sofas, on couches around the walls already in the 8th century, and then it became popular by the Greeks in the Hellenistic and Roman times, until the late Roman, early Byzantine, 4th, 5th centuries CE. It's a very common thing in the Hellenistic and Roman cultures. But to find such a thing in such a good state of preservation, two identical halls, decorated with these stones, with these pilasters, I want to remind you that the only other structure that was decorated like that in Jerusalem in the Second Temple period is the Temple Mount itself. The decoration of the exterior walls of the Temple Mount was with pilasters, pilasters are these thin column-like that are part of the walls. It's actually one stone. The same stone that built the wall also is engraved as thin columns that are climbing from the cornice, from this string that is protruding from the wall. So it's a very, very delicate, spatial, monumental way of decoration. We don't have too many examples of such things in Israel and in Jerusalem. So immediately it puts it in the high-level structures. The size of the building, it's more than 20 meters. It is divided into three parts, two triclinia. One is the one where we stand, the other one is the other one we would soon go there, and in between them, this fountain. Now let's take a look at the fountain, and